They hauled off my car at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning without even bothering to ask what was underneath the cover. I came back from a business trip just in time to see a tow truck dragging away what they assumed was some piece of junk. Standing there with her arms folded, the HOA president had that smug little grin plastered across her face like she'd just saved the neighborhood from an eyesore. Neighbors peered out from their blinds and bay windows like this was some kind of reality show unfolding in real time. The crunch of gravel under my shoes echoed as I walked up to the empty driveway. That's when the sharp bite of diesel fumes mixed with the manicured scent of their overpriced landscaping and, honestly, the stench of their arrogance. They thought they knew exactly what was under that tarp. They thought wrong, dead wrong, about the car, about me, and especially about who really held ground in this community. So, let me ask you, what would you do if your neighbors made that kind of assumption about you? Drop a comment below, let me know where you're tuning in from, and tell me if you've ever been stuck dealing with one of those nightmare HOAs. But let me rewind for a second and explain how I ended up in this ridiculous mess. My name's Marcus. I'm 48. And about half a year ago I was crawling through the ugliest divorce you could imagine. 2 decades of marriage gone in an instant. My ex walked away with the McMansion, half my retirement account, and custody of 2 teenagers who barely acknowledged I existed anymore. That's where I was starting over at damn near 50. I needed something smaller, something that didn't scream failure every time I walked in. That's when I found this corner townhouse in Willowbrook Estates. Picture it. 847 homes ranging from $800,000 up past $2.3 million. The sort of place where everyone's garage has German engineering parked inside, and the lawns look so perfectly edged it's like someone drew them with a ruler. The air smells like fresh mulch the second you pull through the gates. You hear the steady whir of leaf blowers and the yap of tiny dogs that probably cost more than most used cars. But the hook for me? That 3-car garage. See, I had something that needed shelter. My Uncle Raymond had passed away the year before and left me his crown jewel, a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB. Now, Uncle Raymond was, let's just call him unconventional, brilliant in business but always secretive, always speaking in riddles. He'd say, "Marcus, real value hides in plain sight. People only notice what they expect, not what's really there." And man, was he right. That Ferrari might have looked beat up, faded paint, worn seats, but under the surface it was a numbers-matching classic, the kind collectors drool over. I even had service records going back 30 years. I kept it under a plain gray tarp, nothing unusual, just protection until I figured out where to send it for restoration. And that's when I crossed paths with Diane Blackwell. Now, if you can conjure up the most stereotypical HOA president imaginable, multiply that by 10, and you've got Diane. Mid-50s, always behind the wheel of her BMW X7, always in gym clothes that never saw an actual workout, and with a smile so sharp it could slice glass. Married to Craig, who peddled pharmaceuticals, with 2 kids in private schools because, in her words, public schools just aren't what they used to be. She'd held on to the HOA presidency for 3 straight terms, and if I've learned anything, it's that people who clutch that kind of petty authority do it because they can't control anything bigger. 3 days after I moved in, knock on the door. There's Diane, wearing that fake sweet grin. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Just a quick question about that vehicle situation in your driveway." I explained it was a classic car. Temporarily covered. Her smile pulled tight like a wire about to snap. Well, we have standards here in Willowbrook. Have you gone over the covenants?" Then she hands me this so-called violation notice. Not official, but dressed up to look threatening. Cheap paper, rough in my hand, and carrying the sickly sweet scent of her perfume mixed with, I swear, her own smugness. That night I sat down and read every single word of those HOA bylaws. And guess what? Nothing banning covered vehicles for up to 30 days. Diane was testing me, just fishing to see if I'd fold like the others before me. But she didn't stop there. That same evening, she fired up the neighborhood text chain. "New guy thinks rules don't apply to him." By the end of the week, I was on the receiving end of the classic suburban freeze-out. Conversations stopped dead the moment I walked up. Blank stares at the mailbox, neighbors turning their backs mid-sentence, whispers that went silent the second I appeared. That's when I realized this wasn't about the car at all. This was Diane staking her claim, trying to show the outsider who ran things here. What I didn't know at the time was that Uncle Raymond left me more than just a Ferrari. He left something bigger, something that was going to turn Diane's little empire completely upside down. But before that bombshell dropped, she decided to up the ante. And let's just say, she picked the wrong fight. 2 weeks after our doorstep showdown, a certified letter shows up in my mailbox. Emergency HOA board meeting, 48 hours notice. Subject: community aesthetic concerns. Location: Diane's house. Now, I've been in enough corporate boardrooms to recognize a setup when I see one. Neutral spaces exist for a reason. Diane hosting at her place was a power move. She wanted home field advantage. The night of the meeting, I pulled up to her cookie-cutter colonial, the kind of place that screamed peaked in high school. The smell of vanilla-scented candles practically hit me from the driveway, so strong it felt like she was masking something rotten. Craig answered the door, beer already in hand at 7 sharp. Real classy. Inside, the kitchen looked like a mock courtroom. 4 board members lined up behind the island like some makeshift Supreme Court, and one lone chair set in the middle for me. My footsteps echoed on the granite as I sat down. I could hear Craig hovering behind me, probably playing the role of supportive husband. "Marcus," Diane started, sliding a manila folder across the counter like it held state secrets. "We've had multiple complaints regarding your situation." She opened it with a little flourish: doorbell camera, screenshots, neighbor emails, even what looked like a property value report she'd clearly pulled off Google 5 minutes earlier. "Property values are at risk," she declared. "Children are asking uncomfortable questions. We have standards in Willowbrook." I sat there listening, and honestly, I had to admire her theatrics. She was turning my Ferrari into some kind of neighborhood menace. But here's the thing about bullies: they bank on their targets being caught off guard. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my own folder. Inside, every page of the Willowbrook covenants, highlighted, annotated, cross-referenced. The sharp slap of those documents hitting her granite counter cut right through the vanilla stench. "Show me the specific violation, Diane." She froze. The board members fidgeted like kids who forgot their homework. "It's about community standards," she stammered. "I understand standards," I replied. "That's why I read the actual rules." I flipped open to the sections I'd marked. Section 4.27. Covered vehicles permitted up to 30 days without board approval. Section 6.1.3 requires written notification before any violation proceedings. Where's mine? And here's a little truth nugget. Most HOA fights happen because residents never bother to read those documents. But the second you do, you'll find out most boards cut corners. Janet, one of the board members, cleared her throat. "Maybe we should table this until legal reviews it." Diane's face cycled through 5 different shades of red. Her little intimidation performance had just flipped into a civics lesson, and she wasn't the one teaching it. "Fine," she spat, jaw tight. "Tabled pending further investigation." I closed my folder, gave them a polite thank you, and walked out with the sound of their silence trailing behind me. Victory, right? Wrong. The next morning, 3 neatly deposited piles of dog mess appeared on my lawn like some twisted calling card. An anonymous note sat waiting in my mailbox. "Trashy car for trashy people." In a year and a half of living in a supposedly dog-friendly neighborhood, nothing like this had ever happened. But the true escalation kicked off later that same afternoon. I was just coming back from errands when I noticed Diane, 2 streets over, giving a home tour. Nothing unusual there, standard realtor stuff, except I overheard her pitch. "It's a lovely neighborhood, though we do have some unfortunate new additions that affect the overall aesthetic." That's when the puzzle snapped into place. This wasn't about HOA compliance at all. It was about money. Diane had been running a tidy little side hustle, pressuring out residents who didn't suit her curated vision, then cashing in on the property turnover. My pushback wasn't just defiance, it was messing with her profit pipeline. So, I did the only rational thing I could think of. I went home and installed a full security system, cameras covering every angle, motion detection, cloud backups, the works, because something told me Diane's next move would be worth catching on tape. But as I mounted those cameras, My mind kept circling back to Uncle Raymond. He'd always been 3 moves ahead of the room. What if he'd seen something like this coming? What if that Ferrari wasn't the only surprise he'd left behind? That evening I dug deep into his old files, really combing through them. Buried in a folder labeled Willowbrook Development 1987, I uncovered something that nearly knocked me out of my chair. Uncle Raymond hadn't only been into cars back in 1967. He'd been knee-deep in real estate, too. A whole lot deeper than I'd ever realized. A mini twist that shifted everything. Suddenly it hit me. Diane Blackwell had picked a fight with the wrong person altogether. But Diane wasn't about to let a little legal embarrassment derail her schemes. Within 48 hours, she pivoted straight into psychological warfare. She organized a neighborhood safety meeting. Everyone was invited except me. Naturally, I found out the way you uncover most suburban plots, through my security footage. Lines of neighbors trudging past my house like mourners on their way to a wake, all carrying identical flyers. The crunch of their shoes on my gravel driveway sounded different now, heavy, disapproving. The very next morning, a petition appeared, laying out clarified vehicle standards. 23 signatures collected by lunchtime. Craig, suddenly Mr. Sociable, dropping little comments to other husbands during dog walks, vague warnings about unclear standards, threatening everyone's property values. Now, every slam of a garage door as I drove by became my new neighborhood soundtrack. Real mature behavior. But Diane's true masterstroke came next. She arranged another informal gathering and rolled in legal backup her brother-in-law, Brandon, allegedly an attorney. I say allegedly because everything about the man screamed second-rate strip mall lawyer punching above his weight. They boxed me in at my mailbox Thursday night. Brandon strutted up in a bargain bin suit that fit like a potato sack, lugging a briefcase held together with duct tape and sheer optimism, rehearsing his serious lawyer face in the reflection of my car. Diane started in with her syrupy, fake concern voice. Marcus, we need to talk about liability issues caused by your vehicle. Brandon cleared his throat, like he was about to recite the Gettysburg Address. Multiple residents have voiced safety concerns regarding unknown contents. Potential homeowners' insurance issues could endanger the entire community. The nauseating mix of his drugstore cologne and Diane's desperation hung in the air. Kids laughed in backyards nearby, their carefree noise a jarring contrast to this cheap street corner courtroom happening at my curb. 72 hours to remove that cover, Brandon declared, pulling out a very official-looking paper that screamed Google Docs template, or face legal action to protect community standards. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Anyone can slap together HOA letterhead and claim authority, but the real power requires board approval and documented authorization. Always demand to see the actual board resolution granting them power. Most of these threats are nothing more than expensive fonts hiding hot air. So, I did what any decent tech executive with a golden parachute would do. I researched. Brandon Kowalski, Esquire, as it turns out, dabbled in DUI defenses and bargain-rate real estate closings. His reviews online were a comedy of errors. 2.5 stars, missed court dates, clients complaining about being ghosted. More importantly, I pulled my purchase documents and contacted the real HOA attorney. And guess what? Brandon had zero authority. His legal opinion was worth exactly the price I paid for it, nothing. By Friday evening, I was at Diane's door, this time with actual legal representation on speakerphone. Even pressing the doorbell felt different now. I wasn't the one being cornered anymore. Diane, we need to talk about Brandon's little unauthorized practice problem, I said. She opened the door wearing her rehearsed smile, but panic flickered behind her eyes like a dying light bulb. I don't understand which. Your brother-in-law's been playing lawyer without any authorization. Here's Maria Gonzalez, our HOA counsel. Maria's voice cut through the speaker. Miss Blackwell, legal representation requires explicit board authorization through my office. Mr. Kowalski has no standing to issue demands or threats. Watching Diane's realization hit was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Craig shuffled up behind her, nervously jangling his keys, and through their open doorway, I caught a glimpse of something sitting on the counter foreclosure notices. Suddenly, it all clicked. This wasn't about standards. Diane was drowning financially, and her HOA stipend was likely their only steady income. My resistance wasn't just annoying. It threatened their survival. "This is harassment," she sputtered, flipping to victim mode. "You're trying to destroy our community." "No," I shot back. "I'm protecting it from fake legal threats. I'll need a written apology by Sunday, or this goes to the State Bar's Ethics Board." The slam of her door echoed down the street, but what I heard wasn't rage. It was desperation. That weekend, the neighborhood's cracks started showing. 3 board members texted me, asking for private conversations. 2 neighbors dropped by with sheepish apologies, and then a new anonymous social media account popped up, Willowbrook Truth, airing board overreach to the public. Diane's carefully constructed power web was beginning to fray, but I could smell danger in the air, that acrid, unmistakable scent of a cornered animal. People drowning don't reach for lifelines. They grab whatever's in reach, even if it drags them down further. Monday morning proved it. An emergency board meeting notice landed in my mailbox like a declaration of war. 24 hours notice, which flat out violated our HOA bylaws requiring 72. But desperate players don't care about rules they've been breaking all along. The agenda was laughably blunt: a vote to amend standards on vehicle storage and to remove disruptive residents. Diane was going nuclear. Her plan? Rewrite the rules retroactively to outlaw my Ferrari, then boot me out of the neighborhood altogether. Her desperation was so thick you could slice it with a kitchen knife. Here's where Diane's cunning really revealed itself. She had gathered proxy votes from her real estate connections, people who didn't actually reside in Willowbrook, but held powers of attorney for relatives, along with a handful of her clients willing to scratch her back. Her scheme was to crowd the meeting room with ringers and push through her amendments with illegitimate votes. I spent Monday night doing what any strategist worth their salt would do: homework. I cross-checked her circulated attendee list with county voter registries, property ownership databases, and official HOA rosters. The feel of those paper sheets in my hands was like evidence materializing, and that's exactly what it was. When meeting night rolled around, it had all the atmosphere of a scheduled execution. Diane had booked the community center and filled it with her fake residents and realtor allies. 67% turnout, she bragged. Except my numbers showed only 34% were actual Willowbrook homeowners. She stood up front, beaming as though she was about to collect an Oscar, presenting her vehicle amendment on glossy PowerPoint slides. "All vehicles must remain visible and identifiable at all times," she declared. "Daily fines of $50 for violations, effective immediately after approval." The sound of her laser pointer clicking against the projection screen felt like claws raking a chalkboard. Behind me, I heard Craig whispering, almost certainly coaching others on how to vote. "This amendment protects our community's standards and preserves property values," Diane announced, gesturing to surveillance-style photos she'd taken of my covered Ferrari. I sat in the back, methodically jotting notes, my phone quietly recording everything. Virginia's a one-party consent state, in case you wondered. Diane's bravado swelled with each approving nod from her stacked audience. She was convinced victory was hers. Here's a knowledge nugget few people know. HOA proxy votes must come from verified residents who genuinely can't attend, not from random acquaintances doing favors for board members. Always demand proof of eligibility. Illegitimate proxies can nullify an entire meeting's outcome. When it came time to vote, Diane's grin could have lit up the Vegas Strip. 23 votes for, 8 against. Amendment passed. Effective immediately, she crowed, glowing as she announced my $50 daily fine would begin the next day, unless I stripped the cover off my car. "Any further business?" she asked, scanning the crowd like royalty overseeing subjects. I rose deliberately, my chair groaning in the silence. "I'd like a copy of the official vote tally and the attendee verification list." Her smile twitched. "That's not necessary. On the contrary, it is. I'll be verifying voting eligibility against county records, as required by state HOA oversight regulations." A wave of nervous shifting filled the room. Several of her supposed proxies buried their eyes in their phones, and the air smelled thick with unease mixing with that industrial carpet stench. "Motion to adjourn," Craig blurted quickly. Too late. That night, I cross-matched every attendee's address with voter rolls. 11 voters weren't Willowbrook residents at all. 3 more were Diane's family using outdated addresses. The vote wasn't just shaky, it was utterly fraudulent. But Diane wasn't finished. Thursday morning, an official violation notice was slipped under my door. Immediate removal of the car cover demanded, plus a $200 administrative fee. Daily $50 fines starting in 48 hours. And the kicker, authorization for towing if I didn't comply. She had just handed me a smoking gun. I spent that day assembling my evidence binder, fraudulent proxies, verification failures, bylaw breaches, and a harassment timeline. Everything cross-referenced, indexed, ready to send to the state HOA Oversight Board. I also phoned Angela Torres, Channel 7's investigative reporter famous for HOA abuse exposés. Let's just say she was very interested in a case involving proxy vote fraud and board embezzlement. But I paused before sending it all because, while I organized my evidence, my mind drifted back to that folder I'd found in Uncle Raymond's papers. Willowbrook Development, 1987. Time to see what secrets Uncle Ray had hidden. That Friday night, bourbon glass in hand and reading glasses perched, I finally opened it. What I found made me set the glass down slowly and reread everything twice. Uncle Raymond hadn't only left behind a Ferrari. He'd been weaving a far bigger game. The papers were sharp, formal, and staggering. Meridian Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware, 1985. Primary asset, 847 acres of Fairfax farmland, bought in 1987 for $340,000. Partner, Willowbrook Construction Group. Total investment, $78 million. Uncle Raymond's ownership, 67%. I read with trembling hands as the smell of old tobacco and leather seeped from his briefcase, mixing with bourbon. The Ferrari wasn't the true inheritance, it was bait, a lure for me to dig deeper. Cross-referencing the corporate filings with my property deed hit me like lightning. Every homeowner in Willowbrook Estates, even Diane Blackwell, was technically my tenant. Raymond had structured it as a ground lease community. The land under every house, every street, every shared area belonged to Meridian Holdings. Residents had bought houses, not the land leases ran 47 years. Their monthly HOA dues bundled in lease payments, flowing directly to Meridian Holdings. Directly to me, those papers suddenly weighed like iron. They weren't just contracts, they were proof. Diane walked on my property. The math floored me. $127,000 per month in lease payments, quietly deposited into Uncle Ray's old business account for 18 months. Balance, $2.3 million untouched, quietly collecting interest. And Diane's so-called HOA embezzlement? She'd been siphoning from my company. The legal punchline was even bigger. HOA authority stopped where landowner rights began. Every vote, fine, and threat Diane had barked was legally void. I held the power to cancel leases for harassment, shut off access to common areas, even control utility easements. I rang Maria Gonzalez, Raymond's estate lawyer, who had been discreetly managing Meridian Holdings. Her voice practically smiled when I finally asked the right questions. "Your uncle always knew this day would come," she said. "He wanted you to learn patience before wielding power." The emotional force hit me like a truck. Uncle Ray had engineered the entire lesson. He knew upscale communities attract small-minded tyrants like Diane. The covered Ferrari wasn't just a car, it was a test. Maria continued, "Diane Blackwell has been tormenting her own landlord while stealing from his company. That's grounds for immediate lease termination under Section 12. One call, and Diane would be forced to sell her home at a crushing loss." But then I found Uncle Ray's note tucked behind the corporate forms. Some people respect power, others respect justice. Use wisely. The irony was rich. Diane had fought to control property she didn't own, waiving authority she never held, while robbing the very landlord she was targeting. But choice was mine. Brutal revenge or a chance to reset the community for good. Uncle Ray had given me weapons for both. The question wasn't whether I had power, it was how to wield it. Saturday morning, my kitchen became a war room, files spread across granite counters. Coffee's sharp scent mixed with the must of old contracts. First recruit, Maria Gonzalez, estate attorney and now my secret weapon. She arrived at noon with a briefcase of corporate filings and a razor smile. "Your uncle would be proud," she said, laying out lease termination steps. "Harassment and intimidation are clear violations. We have cause." Second recruit, Detective Jake Morrison, my neighbor 3 doors down, retired Fairfax County PD. Jake had been watching Diane's behavior with trained interest. "I've been logging her harassment," he said, opening a notebook. "Dates, witnesses, photos. This is a textbook stalking case." The careful, neat handwriting on those pages felt like justice embodied. Third ally, Sarah Chen, forensic accountant and my old colleague from the tech world. She arrived with her laptop and that predator's grin she wore when she smelled fraud. "HOA embezzlement is my specialty," she said. "Give me 24 hours. Sunday night, the 4 of us regrouped at my kitchen table. Sarah's spreadsheet sprawled across my screen like a roadmap of Diane's crimes. "Systematic theft," she declared. "Fake consulting payouts, contractor kickbacks, padded maintenance fees, $94,000 stolen in 2 years. Jake slid his evidence folder across. "Escalation pattern, verbal harassment, property damage, false legal threats." Any prosecutor would call this organized intimidation. Maria tapped her pen against termination documents. "Lease violations include harassment of the landowner, normally 30 days notice, but with this record, we can accelerate." Then Uncle Ray's brilliance came into focus. I produced Tommy Reeves's Ferrari authentication report, ASA certified, 4 decades in classic cars. Appraisal, $2.1 million. Original invoice from 1,967, $11,400. My uncle had bought a masterpiece and let everyone believe it was junk. The psychological sting was delicious. Diane had spent months waging war against what she thought was worthless trash, never realizing it was worth more than her entire house. Knowledge nugget worth remembering. Ground lease agreements give landowners ultimate control over tenant conduct. Even in HOA-controlled communities, most residents don't realize they're tenants on leased land. Maria summed up our position with a steady smile. The legal strategy was clear. Phase 1. Reveal the car the next time she tried to hassle me. Phase 2. Present hard financial records to the board. Phase 3. Disclose true ownership at a public community meeting. Phase 4. Bring in the media if she refused to step down. That was the framework. Jake laid out the counter-surveillance plan in detail, extra cameras covering every angle of my property, discrete body-worn recorders, encrypted backups, stored off-site. From here forward, every move would be documented. The neighborhood intel network we'd started was already paying off. 3 different residents had quietly reached out, sharing their own stories of Diane's bullying tactics. Jake noticed a pattern. She always went after people who didn't fit her picture of the perfect neighbor, then pressured them until they moved. Sarah's forensic work gave me the most powerful weapon, the financial leverage I'd inherited. She explained it plainly. I didn't just own a house here. I controlled the infrastructure beneath the entire community. Land rights, utility easements, common areas, HOA fund streams. "You're not just a resident," she said. "You control the systems that make Willowbrook run." Knowledge nugget for you. Most HOA battles can be flipped on their head once you dig into who actually owns the dirt under people's feet. Most homeowners never stop to question who truly controls their land. Then Tommy came in with the last missing piece. He dropped a thick binder on my table, complete Ferrari restoration records. Matching engine numbers, original paint codes, meticulous service history stretching back half a century. "This car is museum quality," he told me. "Your uncle kept it immaculate. Under that cover was a treasure, not a junker." Angela Torres from Channel 7 had already shown interest in the story. The headline practically wrote itself. HOA president caught embezzling while harassing the true property owner. Maria reminded us. The timing of going public would be critical, but it wasn't just evidence. I had to be ready mentally. Maria coached me on calm, controlled delivery when the moment came. We role-played Diane's possible counterattacks, rehearsed measured responses, and even mapped out worst-case retaliation. By Sunday evening, the strategy was airtight. Maria would draft lease violation notices. Jake would manage surveillance. Sarah would prepare financial presentations. Tommy would oversee the Ferrari's authentication reveal. The sound of papers shuffling across my dining table felt like destiny clicking into place. Uncle Raymond had left me more than assets. He'd left me the tools to teach an entire neighborhood what happens when arrogance meets reality. Phase 1 would trigger with Diane's next move. And with Diane, waiting usually didn't take long. Sure enough, her desperation hit a breaking point at 5:47 a.m. on Tuesday. I woke to the rumble of a diesel engine and the hydraulic whine of a tow truck reversing into my driveway. From my upstairs window, I saw Diane directing the whole operation like some suburban Napoleon. Craig hovered with his phone, recording everything as evidence. The tow driver, big, seasoned guy, walked up to my covered Ferrari like a pro who'd seen it all. I slipped into my bathrobe, poured coffee into a mug, and strolled outside like I was just grabbing the morning paper. Across the street, Jake already had his camera rolling, his retired cop instincts fully awake. "Morning, folks," I called, voice friendly. "Perfect weather for a little Grand Theft Auto, don't you think?" The tow operator froze mid-step. "Sir, I have authorization from the HOA. Do you want to see it?" He handed me a flimsy work order signed by Diane, claiming the car was abandoned and unsafe. The cheap paper felt weak in my hands. Nothing like the solid legal documents I'd been holding lately. Then Diane strutted out of Craig's BMW, clipboard held high like a general brandishing a sword. "Finally enforcing standards, Marcus," she crowed. "Daily fines total $350 now, plus towing fees. You should have complied." By then, the noise had drawn half the block. Garage doors rolled open. Families spilled onto their driveways. The Pattersons, the Martinezes, even the teenagers who normally slept till noon. A whole audience gathering for the morning's drama. I sipped my coffee, strolled over to the covered car, and rested one hand on the tarp. "Before you haul anything off," I said calmly, "maybe the neighborhood would like to see what's actually under here." Phones came out instantly. Kids craned forward. Parents hushed them. You could feel the anticipation like static in the air. "What's under there, Mr. Marcus?" little Sarah Martinez asked, her tiny voice cutting through the silence. "Why don't we all find out together?" I replied. With one smooth motion, I pulled back the cover. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. The rising sun caught the Ferrari's freshly restored Rosso Corsa paint, the chrome wire wheels, the flawless Italian curves. It was art in metal. "Holy hell," the tow driver muttered under his breath, giving a low whistle. "That's a real Ferrari." Diane's face flickered through shock, disbelief, then pure fury. Craig lowered his phone, suddenly less eager to record. Neighbors who had been cold-shouldering me weeks earlier now stared like they wanted to crawl under rocks. "It's beautiful, Marcus," Sarah Martinez breathed, her teacher's voice soft with awe. "What's something like that worth?" one of the men asked. That's when I pulled Tommy's paperwork from my folder, timing it like a magician's trick. Restoration puts the value at about $2.1 million. The tow driver immediately stepped back, hands raised. "No way I'm touching a $2 million classic. Lady, you didn't tell me this was a Ferrari." But Diane, stubborn as ever, doubled down. "Doesn't matter what it's worth. Rules are rules. They apply to everyone." The crowd's energy shifted instantly. You could feel their sympathy evaporate. Craig tugged on her sleeve, whispering frantically. But Diane was too far gone to hear reason. "Anyone else here think this looks like junk?" I asked. Nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Kids begged their parents to let them touch the car. The tide had turned. Diane was stranded, her power slipping away right in front of her. That's when I dropped the first bombshell. "Diane, there's something else you should probably know." I held up my phone, Maria on speed dial. "You've been trying to tow your landlord's car." The confusion on her face was priceless. "I own the ground your house sits on." I continued. "Every HOA check you write includes rent to my company. Meridian Holdings. You've spent months harassing the very person who controls your lease." Her gasp was sharp, like she'd been punched. Craig went pale as the financial implications hit him. The crowd murmured. Phones lighting up. Google searches flying. "That's impossible," Diane whispered. I handed her Uncle Raymond's notarized corporate documents, proof of 67% ownership of the land beneath Willowbrook Estates. "Your little embezzlement scheme? You've been stealing from me." The tow truck roared to life, already pulling away without the Ferrari. Neighbors crowded closer, some apologizing, others admiring the car, all of them suddenly keeping distance from Diane's sinking ship. Social media feeds buzzed with photos and videos, the story exploding before her eyes. Jake's video had already gone up on the Willowbrook Truth account, blasting out real-time updates for anyone following the saga. But I could feel danger thick in the air, that sharp, acrid smell of a cornered animal about to lash out in the stupidest way possible. Diane's meltdown detonated that same evening with the grace of a pipe bomb. By 6 p.m., emergency board meeting notices were slapped onto every door, listing agenda items that would have made Stalin grin. Removal of fraudulent residents and legal measures against disruptive individuals threatening property values. She'd gone fully scorched earth, accusing me of lying about my financial standing and falsifying property documents through criminal fraud. The stench of her desperation was so pungent you could bottle it and sell it under the label OD anxiety. But here's where her truly nasty brilliance shone. She wasn't just scheming to expel me. She wanted my reputation in ashes first. Her real estate contacts became a rumor mill, whispering tales about a con man with a flashy stolen car and shady, possibly criminal, cash flow. The gossip snowballed, painting me as everything from a drug lord to a tax cheat. Meanwhile, Sarah's forensic accounting had uncovered the brutal truth behind Diane's finances. 3 months of unpaid mortgage, foreclosure already filed. Her real estate business bleeding out thanks to a tanking market. This wasn't HOA policy anymore. This was survival at all costs. By Wednesday evening, walking into the emergency meeting felt like stepping straight into a setup. Diane had locked down the community center, packing it with her loyalists. Craig sat stiffly, looking like he'd rather be under dental surgery. Brandon, the pretend lawyer, was sweating through his bargain rack suit, while 2 board members clung stubbornly to Diane's propaganda. The odor of stale coffee and synthetic carpet mixed with fear, giving the place the vibe of a battlefield wrapped in suburbia. Out in the parking lot, Channel 7's Angela Torres just happened to be there, with a full camera crew tipped off by someone who definitely wasn't me. Diane launched the evening with a rehearsed monologue that would have made McCarthy proud. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been infiltrated by a man who deliberately misled us about his identity and intentions. She had props now, PowerPoint slides of my Ferrari, cherry-picked property records, even a fabricated timeline of deceptive actions. Each click of her laser pointer against the projection screen sounded like a countdown to her implosion. Marcus Reynolds has been posing as a legitimate resident while orchestrating an elaborate real estate fraud, she proclaimed, waving half-truth documents like a stage magician. Then Brandon waddled up, clutching a legal pad like he was about to interrogate a homicide suspect. We have evidence of fraudulent property claims and possible identity theft. The board moves to revoke his residency pending investigation. I sat quietly in the back with Maria, both of us jotting down notes while Diane neatly built her own noose. The crowd buzzed with uneasy murmurs, suspicion flickering in their eyes. Mob mentality was primed to ignite. Diane pushed on. Any resident engaged in criminal fraud forfeits the right to live here. We vote tonight to begin removal proceedings. That was my cue. I rose slowly, the scrape of my chair against the floor screeching like chalk dragged across a board. Diane, before you call the cops on your landlord, maybe you should take a look at the complete financials. Maria produced Sarah's forensic analysis with the precision of a stage illusionist, spreading the documents across the table. The crackle of official pages sliced the tension like a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, addressing the crowd, allow me to present evidence of systematic embezzlement by your HOA president. The projector screen shifted Sarah's spreadsheets, replacing Diane's propaganda slides. Fake consulting invoices, inflated maintenance charges, kickbacks all backed up by bank statements and corporate filings. $94,000 siphoned off over 2 years from Meridian Holdings. I continued. The company that owns 67% of the land under your homes. The mood of the room flipped like a switch. Diane's complexion drained through 17 shades of panic as the numbers gutted her narrative in real time. Brandon, desperate, blurted his final misstep. This is fabricated. Marcus Reynolds doesn't own a thing here. Maria stood calmly, voice steady. Maria Gonzalez, estate attorney for Meridian Holdings LLC. Here are certified copies of the corporate ownership, ground lease agreements, and state filings. The shuffle of papers echoed through the hall as neighbors compared deeds, realizing they'd been watching their own landlord get harassed. Whispers swelled, the truth spreading faster than Diane's lies. "Motion for no confidence in the president," Janet from the board announced. "Seconded," came 3 voices instantly. Craig was already tugging Diane toward the exit as Channel 7's cameras captured her unraveling. "This isn't over," she screeched. "I'll sue every one of you. I'll—" The door slammed mid-threat. Inside, the board vote came swiftly, 51 for Diane's removal, Craig abstaining since he was already halfway to the parking lot. The fallout was immediate. Emergency election scheduled, plans to recover stolen funds approved. Diane's real estate license flagged for investigation, thanks to media exposure. But hanging in the air was something sweeter. The first whiff of justice finally catching up. 3 weeks later came the community healing meeting, treated like a small-town election night. I rolled up to the community center in the Ferrari, now the neighborhood's unlikely celebrity car. That V12 rumble drew kids to the windows, their faces lighting up like moths drawn to fire. Channel 7 was back too, cameras rolling as residents crowded inside. The atmosphere was charged, fresh coffee, nervous optimism, the rare perfume of democracy working as intended. Diane was, unsurprisingly, absent. Her house now displayed a bold red, for sale sign that might as well have read, "Foreclosure Special." Craig had gone to ground, probably drafting his "just following orders" defense for the divorce lawyer. The meeting opened with Sarah Martinez, the kindergarten teacher everyone genuinely trusted, now serving as president. She rapped the gavel against the podium, each knock sounding like justice at the door. "First order of business," she announced, "implementing transparent governance to prevent future abuses." Jake Morrison raised his hand for the oath as security liaison, his retired detective credentials lending immediate weight to the reformed board. The contrast with Diane's reign of intimidation couldn't have been sharper. These were neighbors working for the community, not themselves. When Sarah invited me to the podium, my palms rested on the worn wood surface. The texture felt nothing like the cold intimidation of Diane's countertop meetings. This was chosen, respectful, collaborative. 3 weeks ago, I began, voice carrying through the packed center. We all learned that assumptions can be very dangerous things. The room fell silent. Parents held their children close. Teens actually lifted their eyes from their phones. For once, every single person in Willowbrook was listening. Neighbors who once avoided me were now leaning in, hanging on every word. Uncle Raymond had given me more than just a Ferrari and some land. He had left me with a lesson in patience, about waiting, about letting people reveal their true nature before passing judgment. I paused, scanning the room, watching suspicion melt into regret, and regret shift into sincere interest in working together for something greater. "Today," I began, "I'm announcing the Raymond Chen Memorial Fund, using my uncle's full name, which he had kept carefully private all his life." The faint shuffle of program pages filled the air as people flipped through the agenda, confused when they couldn't find this item listed anywhere. From the $2.3 million in accumulated ground lease income, a permanent scholarship fund would be created for local high school graduates pursuing engineering and business degrees. The applause started hesitantly but swelled quickly, building into a rolling wave across the community center. Angela Torres gave her cameraman a subtle signal to start filming reactions. This was the sort of redemptive twist that makes evening news sparkle. $50,000 annually, I added, to be overseen by an elected community committee. Our first recipient will be Jake Morrison's granddaughter, who's studying mechanical engineering at Virginia Tech. Jake's eyes glistened, his lips trembling as the crowd erupted into a standing ovation. The scrape of chairs and the thunder of clapping reverberated off the walls, while the faint smell of coffee and styrofoam cups mingled with the salty tang of joyful tears. But I wasn't finished. Additionally, we'll be launching a community improvement fund, new playground equipment, garden plots dedicated to food bank donations, and an annual classic car show to raise money for local charities. The crowd roared again, but I raised my hand, holding them for the closing move. And because good intentions mean nothing without accountability, We're instituting mandatory financial transparency monthly reports, open ledgers, and third-party auditing. Never again will anyone manipulate this community's trust. Here's the knowledge nugget. Document everything in HOA conflicts. Videos, audio, bank records. These tools aren't just leverage in legal disputes. They're the scaffolding for rebuilding trust after abuse. Angela Torres stepped forward with her microphone, eyes gleaming. Marcus, how does it feel to turn conflict into community progress? My uncle always said real wealth isn't about possessions, it's about knowing who deserves your trust. Today, this community proved it's worthy of trust. Outside, my Ferrari gleamed in the parking lot, not as a target of scorn anymore, but as a living emblem of change. Children lined up to take turns sitting behind the wheel, while their parents traded their own horror stories of HOA bullying in other neighborhoods. The irony was exquisite. Diane's harassment had detonated so spectacularly that it birthed reform spreading across the region. Her vendetta against me had accidentally lit the torch for broader HOA accountability. As the meeting wrapped, neighbors came forward one after another, finally confessing about intimidation they had suffered under Diane's regime. Harassment patterns that had silenced anyone who didn't conform to her rigid image of acceptable residence. That silence was shattered for good. The sensory weight of victory was undeniable. Children's laughter echoing as the Ferrari's engine revved, the rich smell of barbecue drifting from an impromptu cookout outside. Warm handshakes, heartfelt hugs from people who weeks before had avoided me. Justice had been served, but more importantly, it had been paired with healing. Exactly what Uncle Raymond would have wanted. The evening closed with a poetic touch, the golden light of sunset reflecting off flawless chrome. A visual exclamation mark telling me the story was ending the way it was meant to. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates made the cover of Virginia Living magazine, hailed as a model for HOA reform. Property values up 12%, satisfaction scores soaring, and my Ferrari, now a regular at charity car shows, raising thousands for good causes. The Raymond Chen Memorial Fund awarded its first batch of scholarships in May, 5 local students pursuing engineering and business, led by Jake Morrison's granddaughter at Virginia Tech. Standing in the auditorium, watching her accept the oversized check, I could practically feel Uncle Raymond's approving presence in the bouquet-scented air. The community garden blossomed into something magical, residents cultivating vegetables for the food bank, children discovering firsthand where food comes from, now neighbors working together instead of glaring across property lines. The laughter of kids picking tomatoes had replaced the muttered complaints and slammed garage doors that defined Diane's rule. As for Diane, she relocated to North Carolina, where real estate licensing hoops are looser. Her marriage survived barely, and Craig found steady footing in medical device sales. Every so often, anonymous donations trickled into the scholarship fund, and I had my suspicions about their origin. Redemption, I realized, takes many shapes. My own life settled too. Sarah Martinez and I began dating quietly after the storm cleared, not rushed. Just 2 adults realizing they enjoyed one another's company during planning meetings. The kids approved, which meant more than I would have guessed. Meanwhile, the Ferrari was fully restored to museum quality, now appraised at $2.4 million. Though its real value was symbolic, a relic turned into centerpiece, exactly as Uncle Raymond intended. Final knowledge nugget. Always research the property ownership history before buying into an HOA. You might discover hidden leverage, unique responsibilities, or even opportunities to build something lasting. The ripple effect didn't stop with Willowbrook. Angela Torres won a regional Emmy for her series on HOA corruption, and our saga became a journalism school case study in uncovering human interest angles in local politics. 3 other neighborhoods reached out, seeking guidance for similar battles. Turns out, HOA tyranny was more common than anyone cared to admit. Maria's law firm carved out a specialty in ground lease disputes, empowering landowners to reclaim dormant authority. Jake launched a security consulting service for HOAs. Sarah expanded her practice into auditing HOA finances. Each of us found renewed purpose in the wreckage Diane left behind. The community impact exceeded even my wildest imagination. Our classic car show became an annual festival, drawing crowds in the hundreds and raising $75,000 last year for shelters and food banks. Neighboring subdivisions joined in, forming connections that bridged old suburban divides. But the sweetest change was the culture shift. HOA meetings filled with residents actively participating, finances laid open, decisions debated fairly. From Diane's dictatorship rose a functional democracy, proving small-scale governance can succeed when fairness outweighs ego. On the personal front, healing came in unexpected ways. My teenagers respected me more after seeing me stand up for principle instead of simmering in resentment. They now split their time evenly between households, and even my ex-wife admitted grudgingly that I'd grown. Uncle Raymond's philosophy had sunk in: patience before reaction, preparation before anger, justice before revenge. The letter tucked in the Ferrari's glove box summed it up perfectly. Real victory is when everyone's situation improves. And so the sensory conclusion feels complete, the Ferrari purring as I drive to speaking events, the scent of blossoms from our thriving community garden, the smooth leather wheels steady under my hands as I chart forward paths. In the rearview mirror, grateful neighbors wave, but all my momentum points ahead. Here's my challenge to you. What's your HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments below. Your story might help someone else spot the warning signs before things spiral. If this gave you hope that justice can outlast petty tyrants, hit subscribe. We've got more David versus Goliath tales lined up. Next week's story: a woman who discovered her subdivision pool was secretly part of her grandmother's estate. You won't want to miss that twist. Remember this: knowledge gives you leverage, but patience gives you strategy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment. It's living well and helping your community thrive. And the sound of that Ferrari's engine echoing down reformed streets is proof. Uncle Raymond would be proud of the lesson fulfilled. Another HOA battle wrapped. If this made you cheer, laugh, or shake your head in disbelief, smash that like button, share your story in the comments, and subscribe, because in the BBS, the battles never stop.